everybody. Jarrard here is coming to you from West Lafayette, Indiana, Purdue University, and doing hopefully maybe the last of our virtual jam sessions for the Jazz Link Student Council of Jazz Institute Chicago's virtual jam session series we've been having. We've been gone for a long time. It's been almost a year now that we haven't been able to share the stage and share information with one another. And I figured maybe it's time to do a recap of things we had talked about before, things that we may have forgotten in our pandemic lockdowns and whatnot, and not being able to see one another. So once we get back to jamming, most important thing, hopefully no one has stopped playing their instrument, stopped practicing. You know, where we've had an abundance of time, and I tell my students all the time, an easy thing to do is to lose track of time, you know, and to get lost in things like great naps or like, you know, hanging out because, you know, you don't have formal school anymore. You know, you got so much freedom that, you know, we realize that freedom is a hard thing to manage. And so, you know, hopefully if we haven't been practicing, putting ourselves in the habit of doing something regularly, so therefore it just becomes part of our daily lives. If we think about it, things like eating and sleeping, so ingrained in us that, you know, happens at the same time all the time, and you notice it when you're hungry. Your body tells you, or it says, oh, it starts making noises and whatnot. Or you start falling asleep. Why? Because you normally fall asleep at that time. But when you're awake, when you normally sleep, oh, it's very noticeable. So making practicing, putting our hands physically on the instrument, part of our daily routines again, so that we refamiliarize ourselves with our instruments and make that reconnection, shall we say. So what's involved in practicing? If you ask me, I think, you know, physically playing the horn, and it doesn't mean you have to be improvising or playing jazz, but physically making a connection with your instrument, be it a voice, violin, a bass, guitar, whatever the case may be. That's part of it. But then, you know, since we have, you know, time, let's say we got an hour to practice a day. You know, maybe you want to spend the last 10 minutes rewarding yourself for the previous 50 that you have organized yourself really well together. So that becomes, reestablishing a connection with sound, because when we think about it, that's the first thing people hear. They don't hear necessarily your technical virtuosity or your choice of notes in an improvisation. They hear what you sound like. So long tones, playing and establishing a solid pitch foundation on your instrument, so that throughout the range of your horn you are able to communicate yourself with the best sound possible. Refamiliarizing yourself with a tune. Thing I've been doing the past couple months is like, I just do a tune a week. Or it's like, it might even be tunes I really think I really knew. And I found that, man, you know, like many folks, you know, during the pandemic, it was kind of like, man, you just kind of lose the inspiration of practicing, you know, or you don't get to play with people. So therefore, you know, there were times where, there were weeks that went by that I didn't practice. But once I got myself back together, you know, it's like, reacquainting myself with songs. And so therefore it becomes, I start to see the jam sessions are happening again. You know, not hopefully, you know, the Jazz Institute jam session will be coming back soon, but at, you know, other places there's jam sessions, and it's like, man, I need to remember songs to go in. So when I'm playing with folks, and that means remembering melodies, remembering the chord changes. And so what do? I try to, you know, I spend part of that week, because I say, every week a tune. Reacquainting myself with lyrics. So I I try to find as many recordings, be it instrumental or vocal, of the tunes I'm doing for that particular week. So therefore, I'm really familiar with how the song sounds, how the song goes. You know, where does it fit into, you know, my library of forms? Time ago, we talked about, the most common song forms you'll tend to hear are 12-bar blueses, 16-bar tunes, and some form of 32-bar song form, whether it be AABA, your standard rhythm changes, or ABAC, you know, 8-bar phrases with first and second endings, those being the B and C sections. So putting all these things together to remember, so that I can expand my song vocabulary. So Also, as I'm listening to those melodies, I'm listening to people perform. So I don't just listen to the recordings and just listen to the melody and that's it. Oh, I listen to the whole entire thing. So listening to solos and whatnot, listening to rhythm section players and like, oh, what's this particular person's approach to playing this form tune? Or what's the vocabulary tendencies this particular person that I'm listening to tends to make? So listening is part of practicing too. Etudes, it's just like playing games. Now I play this game on my cell phone every day, and the point of the game is to, the reason I got it was like, oh, I need to work on remembering things better. Like I was concerned with not remembering characters in movies or characters' names in books. If I read a book, I could tell you the plot line and everything, but I couldn't remember everybody's name. So I started playing these games, and I see the benefit of this game. It gives me a bunch of different games to play. So let's say there's 20 games, and it just rotates through them and says randomly, use your vocabulary. And then you'll find out like, oh man, I'm not quite fast enough with vocabulary words. I'm not quite fast enough with doing math problems. And I found that over months of doing this game, I've actually gotten quite better at reading. I've gotten quite better, actually learned some mathematical techniques from this game. And so it's almost like mental etudes. I look at it. This game is like a mental etude because it's not something I would do regularly. So in practicing all the time, etudes, classical etudes, because what do those tend to do, in my opinion? Oh, they tend to help with your facility on the horn. But also, I do jazz etudes too, where it's like, oh, I may be reading somebody's interpretation of their playing on a rhythm changes or on a 12-bar blues, but it's not necessarily a record. It's just an etude that's been written out. And even with some of my students, I've gone back to simple etudes of like Jim Snyder etudes, the Jazz Conception book, and even I got one student working at a Lenny house, and I had showed him the date. I was like, look at this date, man. It says 12/1/1985 or no, 1988 or something like that on it. I was like, oh, that's the last time I looked at this book. And I was like, man, it's before you were born. But it's like, oh, that was when I was in like junior high, but still it has a place of importance. And so, it, for one, shows me how certain rhythms work, and so therefore if I'm reading music or something, I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to sound like this because that's what it looks like. I've seen certain things in these etudes. Practicing fundamentals like scales. If we think about improvisation, what is improvisation? Oh, it's just expressing ourselves via musical vocabulary. And how big can our vocabulary be? Oh, it can be as big as you want to get it, where it's like, oh, you may think you're very articulate and know lots of words, but look at me, I'm still playing a video game that deals with language and math. Why? Because I also want to expand my vocabulary. So when I'm communicating with different people, oh, I got an expanse of words I can use, So speaking is just like improvising in the sense that my brain is choosing what to say to convey a message. And so therefore, if I'm limited in my vocabulary, oh, I'm giving the same message no matter what the topic of conversation is a lot of the times. Or it's just not interesting to listen to me after a while because I'm saying the same things over and over again. So using etudes for vocabulary, using transcribing solos for vocabulary, using learning new songs as vocabulary. All these things play a part in learning vocabulary. So by the time I've gotten done with my 40 minutes of practice, 10 minutes, I say I want to reward myself. The biggest reward for me is like, just playing a tune. And the hardest thing in the pandemic is like not being able to hang out and play with real folks so much, but having to play with like great app, iReal Pro, gives you yourself a little play along. Great tools, Jamie Abersol play alongs. But there's nothing that can beat playing with real people because there's a different kind of reaction that happens. So the reward for myself is, I get to play, and I just pick a tune or pick a song, and even if I don't know the melody, I might just look at the chord changes and practice blowing over tunes. And then therefore, if I really like it, blowing over it, I'll research the tune that I randomly picked and say, okay, let me check it out. So therefore, that becomes part of more and more practice for me. So I believe before almost a year ago, I talked about your best teacher. Of course, we should listen to our elders and teachers and folks who we look up to, but I found that the best possible teacher I've ever had when it came to jazz was listening to recordings. So expanding your vocabulary in the sense of, I check out jazz music on the regular. And even though we've been shut in for a while, music still comes out. And since I've had so much more time, there's even been times where I've expanded my horizons and listened to some stuff that I would not normally listen to on a regular basis. And I believe that you can always find musical inspiration, vocabulary, etc. from anything. So expand your horizons so that, you're familiar with different styles of music, different approaches to songs, even listening to different musicians approach a piece of music from different stylistic perspectives, so like, man, what if we heard somebody from the 30s play rhythm changes versus somebody from the 80s versus a country and western star versus listening to a pop singer tackle a tune like that too. Same tune, but vastly different approaches, and therefore you can never have too much information. The more ways you're able to approach something, the better. So making sure that you're listening to music on a regular basis, making it a part of your daily life. So I tell students of mine here, it's like, if you don't see me in class, you're normally seeing me listening to music because I got headphones on and I'm not doing phone calls. I'm usually walking across campus, or if I'm back home walking around town or in the park listening to music. So therefore, even if I'm not concertedly listening, it's happening in the background and I retain something. So there's times where I talk about, concerted listening. I'm sitting in my office, or I'm sitting here in this office. Usually I just turn off all the lights and turn the music on my computer and just sit there and listen. Then there's times where it's just ambient. If I'm doing some work or something, I'll play music in the background and it'll be on. I won't be focused on it, but I'm still catching glimpses of, some great things. And so therefore I retain little bits and pieces. And I'll often go through the day saying, man, I don't know why I keep singing this melody or keep hearing this particular thing. It's because I probably heard it at some point earlier in the day, whether it was on my headphones or whether it was while I was doing work. So as we get back into regular life, or life as we used to know it, hopefully, we work on remembering, because I'm sure many of us have forgotten, or we have become laxed in our, efforts. So we want to get ourselves back on the horse, as we shall say, and get to doing the things we like to do, making music, listening to music, checking out new things, and hopefully participating in some jam sessions. When we get to these jam sessions again, important to remember the rules of jam sessions. They're not, there's just good ideas. I don't like to think that they're rules, but if you get on the stage, make sure you know a tune. So before you go to play with folks, have an idea about what you want to do. Look at it like that conversation. You don't want to have the conversation and no one's listening to you, or you just keep repeating the same things over and over and over and over again. So know what you want to say before you get up on that stage and make music with those people. There's nothing wrong with plotting out exactly what you want to do. I'm going to play 2 choruses. Maybe if I'll trade 4s or something, there's always possibilities of things that can happen. But being prepared for anything and being concise about what you want to say, so that you don't get up there and you just run it on sentences. If you're concise, you might get to play more than one tune. So being prepared, having tunes in mind, knowing the melodies, knowing the chord changes. If you listen to lots of songs, maybe you can figure out a harmony line or something too in your soloing, not just babbling off at the mouth musically, but really having some concise statements that you want to make and prepared to say. And there's nothing wrong with preparing solos. While you may get the idea that's not the magic of jazz improvising, it's making it up on the spot. But I make up things all the time, every day, but I don't make it up from out of thin air. I've either, if I'm picking out clothes for the day, I've probably seen an outfit and said, those will probably look good together, and I can't wear all the outfits on the same day. So therefore, I just build a vocabulary in my mind about outfits. So therefore, when I'm picking them out, I'm choosing, but it's not like I'm just making it up as I go along. I know what's in that closet. I know what kind of shoes I got. I know what kind of socks I got. I know what kind of shirts and ties I've got. And so therefore, the improvisation is kind of putting things together based off of things that I already know that I've obtained. So nothing wrong with pre-planning solos. I tell some of my students here to do it all the time. Where it's like, man, sometimes you have to say the same thing over and over and over and over again and get really good at it and be convincing at it and then moving on to something different. But there's nothing wrong with preparing your statements. So I look forward to hopefully seeing you all again in the coming months or in the fall or at any kind of Jazz Institute Chicago events that may happen, be they virtual or hopefully soon in person, So the task is on us to remember and to get ourselves back in tip-top shape. And hopefully I'll be seeing you all very, very soon. Thanks so much, and I look forward to hearing from you or seeing you.